All right, let's dive into this fasting thing. You guys have been sending in some interesting stuff about it. A bunch of excerpts from that Fasting for Better Health podcast. They had an episode. Um, is fasting the missing key to your health goals?
Yeah.
So maybe it is. Let's see if fasting really lives up to the hype.
It's wild how fasting is super old, like centuries old. But now it's getting popular again, and the best part is that modern science is starting to back it up.
Yeah, it's like this ancient wisdom is getting rediscovered through all this new research. But before we get too excited, what exactly is fasting? Everyone's using the word these days.
Yeah, it's definitely a buzzword, but it's more than just skipping a meal or two. It's about giving your body a break from digesting so it can focus on other important stuff.
So it's like a break for your body to do
Yeah.
some internal housekeeping.
Exactly. That podcast we're looking at uses a good analogy. They say it's like spring cleaning for your cells.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's not just what you eat, but when you eat. But why is everyone talking about it NOW? If it's been around for so long.
Because now we have the science to prove it works. And the more research we do, the more potential benefits we find. That podcast episode mentioned a few, like fat loss, more energy, and even better heart health.
Yeah, I saw those too.
Yeah.
It almost seems too good to be true. But let's take a look at the science behind it. One thing that kept coming up in that podcast was ketosis. What is that all about?
So ketosis is what happens when your body runs low on glucose, which is its main source of fuel. Instead of using glucose from food, it starts burning stored fat to make ketones, and then your body uses those for energy.
So it's like switching from carbs to fat for fuel.
Exactly. And that podcast highlights some research showing that fasting can be a really effective way to do that. One study they talked about showed that intermittent fasting was actually better for fat loss than just restricting calories.
Wow, that's really interesting. It seems like fasting isn't just about eating Ellis. It's about changing when you eat. But what about this other thing they talked about, autophagy?
Ah, yes, autophagy. It's a pretty amazing process. It basically happens when you fast and your body starts to clean up on a cellular level. It breaks down and recycles damaged parts of your cells, kind of like taking out the trash.
So it's like hitting the refresh button on your cells.
Exactly. And the podcast goes even further. They explain how this cell rejuvenation can have all sorts of benefits, like reducing inflammation, slowing down aging, and even lowering the risk of some chronic diseases. They even mentioned a study linking increased autophagy to a lower risk of neurodegenerative diseases.
So fasting isn't just about losing weight. It's about improving your health on a deeper level. That's pretty amazing.
It really is, and it doesn't stop there. The podcast also talked about the impact of fasting on insulin sensitivity.
Oh yeah, insulin sensitivity. That's another thing that caught my eye. Can you explain how that works?
Sure, so insulin is a hormone that regulates your blood sugar. When you eat, your body releases insulin to help transport glucose from your blood into your cells, where it's used for energy. But if you're constantly eating, your body can start to become less responsive to insulin, which is called insulin resistance.
And I'm guessing that's not a good thing.
No, not really. Insulin resistance is a major risk factor for type 2 diabetes, which is a serious metabolic disorder. But that's where fasting comes in. By reducing those frequent insulin spikes, fasting helps reset your body's insulin response and makes it more efficient at regulating blood sugar.
So you're giving your body a break from all that glucose so it can become more sensitive to insulin again.
Exactly. And the podcast highlights some research to support this. They talked about a study that showed intermittent fasting led to big improvements in insulin sensitivity for people with pre-diabetes.
Wow, that's incredible. So we've got fat burning, cellular cleansing, and improved blood sugar control, all potentially linked to fasting. It's starting to sound like this could really be a game changer for health. But I'm curious, with all these potential benefits, can fasting help you reach specific goals?
That's a great question. And it's something the podcast addressed directly. They emphasize that fasting is a powerful tool, but it's not magic. The key is to tailor your approach to your individual goals.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing, more like a tool you can use to get where you want to be, which makes sense. But let's get practical here. We've talked about all these benefits, but how do people actually do it? What are the most popular ways to fast?
Yeah, let's get into the specifics. That podcast actually did a really good job of explaining some of them, and there are a lot of options. One that seems to be getting really popular is intermittent fasting, specifically the 168 method. Have you heard of that one?
Yeah, I have, but I'm still a little fuzzy on the details. Can you explain it for me? And for anyone listening who might be wondering the same thing.
Of course. So the 168 method is all about timing. You fast for 16 hours every day, and then you have an 8-hour window where you can eat. So you might finish dinner at 8 p.m., and then not eat again until noon the next day.
So it's like extending that overnight fast you naturally do while you're sleeping?
Exactly. And that's one of the things that makes this method so appealing. It's pretty easy to fit into a busy life. You're not really changing your diet that much, just the timing of when you eat.
But wouldn't that be super hard, 16 hours without eating anything? That sounds like I'd be starving.
It's a valid concern, and the podcast talked about that. They said that the first few days can be tough, but they also said that your body is really good at adapting. Over time, your hunger cues change, and a lot of people find that those intense cravings actually go away.
So it's like retraining your body to expect food at certain times.
Right. And they mentioned a few tips to make it easier, like staying hydrated throughout the day. Dehydration can actually feel like hunger sometimes.
Oh, yeah, I definitely do that.
Yeah.
I think I'm hungry when I'm actually just thirsty.
It happens to a lot of people. They also said it's important to eat nutrient-dense foods during your eating window. Things like protein, healthy fats, and fiber. Those can help you feel fuller for longer and avoid those energy crashes.
So it's about making smart food choices to stay satisfied. But what about those other fasting methods they talked about, like the 5.2 diet? How does that one work?
So the 5.2 diet is a little different. Instead of restricting your eating window every day, it's about restricting your calories on 2 non-consecutive days of the week. So you eat normally for 5 days, and then on the other 2 days, you limit your calorie intake to 500, 600 calories.
So you're not totally fasting on those 2 days, just eating a lot less.
Exactly. It's a more flexible option. That some people find easier to stick with
Yeah.
because they're not completely giving up food, but it still takes planning and discipline to stay within those calorie limits.
What about eat, stop, eat? That one sounds kind of hardcore.
Yeah, it does. With Eat, Stop, Eat, you do a full 24-hour fast, once or twice a week. So you pick a day or two and don't eat anything for a full 24 hours.
That sounds like a big commitment. What are the benefits of doing that?
Well, the podcast mentioned a few. They said that longer fasts like this can really ramp up cellular repair and regeneration. They explained how autophagy, that cell cleaning we talked about, becomes even more powerful during longer fasts.
It's like a deeper cleanse for your body.
That's a good way to put it. They also talked about some research that suggests longer fasts can lead to more weight loss and improvements in insulin sensitivity. But it's important to remember that this method isn't for everyone, and you should definitely work up to it gradually. And talk to your doctor before you try it.
It makes sense that it's powerful, but you need to be careful with it. Now, there was one more method they mentioned that really caught my attention. Alternate day fasting. Is it as intense as it sounds?
It can be pretty intense. Basically, you alternate between days of eating normally and days of complete fasting. It's definitely one of the harder methods. But it can also lead to really fast weight loss and big improvements in your metabolism.
It sounds like it would take a lot of willpower to
Yeah.
stick to a schedule like that.
It definitely does. And the podcast was very clear that it's not for everyone, especially people with certain health conditions or pregnant or breastfeeding women. They said it's really important to talk to your doctor before trying this method.
It's a good reminder that fasting can be great for a lot of people, but it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. You have to find the method that works for you and your goals and health status. But let's say you've done your research, you've talked to your doctor, and you're ready to try fasting. What are some tips for success?
Well, the podcast gave a lot of practical advice. One of the most important things they said is to start slowly. Don't try to do too much too fast. Ease into it. Gradually increase your fasting window to give your body time to adjust.
Baby steps are key.
Exactly. And they really stress the importance of listening to your body. If you feel any extreme discomfort, like dizziness or anything that worries you, break your fast and talk to your doctor.
Right. This is about improving your health, not putting it at risk. What about hunger? Any tips for dealing with the cravings?
They had some good advice for that too. Staying hydrated is super important, like we talked about earlier. But they also suggested finding things to distract yourself. Activities that can take your mind off food, like going for a walk, reading a book, or listening to a podcast.
That makes sense. Sometimes just changing your focus can help.
Definitely. And when it comes to breaking your fast, they recommended starting with small, easily digestible meals instead of heavy or processed foods.
So no diving into a giant pizza after a 24-hour fast.
Probably not the best idea. They said it's better to focus on nutrient-rich whole foods. That will nourish your body and give you lasting energy.
It's about breaking your fast gently, not shocking your system.
Right. They also touched on something that I think is really important, the social aspect of fasting. It can be tough to stick to a fasting routine when the people around you don't understand or support it.
That's true. It can feel isolating. especially if you're always having to explain yourself or say no to food in social situations.
Exactly. The podcast had some good tips for dealing with that. They encourage people to find supportive communities, online or in person, where they can connect with others who understand fasting.
It definitely helps to have people who get it, people who are on the same journey.
It really does. And they also said it's important to be patient with yourself and celebrate the small wins along the way. Consistency is key, but it's not about being perfect. If you slick up or have a day where you don't follow your plan, don't get down on yourself. Just get back on track and keep going.
That's so important. It's about progress, not perfection. And I think that's a perfect way to transition into the final part of our deep dive, where we'll talk about some of the nuances of fasting and answer some common questions and concerns. Ready to keep going?
Absolutely. I'm excited to dig even deeper into this.
Okay, so we're in the home stretch now, but I want to make sure we cover all the bases. Before we wrap up this deep dive into fasting, I know there are probably still some questions out there, especially if you're thinking about trying this yourself.
Absolutely. It's totally normal to have questions when you're changing something as fundamental as how you eat.
One question that always comes up is whether fasting is safe for everyone. We talked about some groups who might need to be careful, but are there any hard and fast rules about who should not fast?
Well, like with any big dietary change, it's always best to talk to your doctor first, especially if you have any health conditions. But there are a few groups who should probably avoid fasting altogether, like people with eating disorders. Fasting could be risky for them because it could trigger unhealthy behaviors.
Yeah, that makes sense. Taking care of your mental and emotional health is just as important as your physical health. What about pregnant or breastfeeding women?
They have special nutritional needs, so fasting might not be the best idea. It's really important for them to talk to their doctor to make sure they're doing what's best for themselves and their babies.
So personalized guidance is really important in those situations. What about people taking medications?
Yeah, fasting can affect how some medications work. So you definitely want to talk to your doctor or pharmacist about that. They can tell you whether fasting is safe for you. And if you need to make any changes to your medication schedule,
It's a good reminder that medications can be a big factor. When you're changing your diet, it's not just about the food itself, but how it interacts with everything else you're putting into your body. Okay, here's another one I hear a lot. Will fasting slow down my metabolism? Is that true?
that's actually a myth. If you severely restrict your calories for a long time, yeah, that can slow down your metabolism. But intermittent fasting done the right way doesn't do that. In fact, some studies have shown that intermittent fasting might actually speed up your metabolism.
Really? How does that work?
It seems to have to do with hormones. Intermittent fasting can increase the production of certain hormones, like norepinephrine, which helps your body burn fat.
So instead of slowing down your metabolism, it might actually give it a boost.
Right. It's about working with your body, not against it. And like I said before, consistency is key. The benefits of fasting build up over time, so stick with it, even if you have a few slip-ups.
Okay, that's good to know. It's encouraging to hear that it's a long-term process. Now, what about supplements? Do you need to take anything special while you're fasting?
You don't need supplements, but there are a few that could be helpful, especially if you're doing longer fasts or if you're really active. Electrolyte supplements can help because you lose electrolytes when you sweat, and a good multivitamin can make sure you're getting all the nutrients you need, even when you're not eating as much,
So it's about supporting your body.
even when you're intentionally restricting your food.
Right.
But like always, talk to your doctor before you start taking any new supplements, just to make sure they're right for you.
Good advice.
Hmm.
Always better to be safe than sorry. Okay, let's talk about the mental and emotional side of fasting now. It can be a tough practice, not just physically, but mentally. Any tips for staying motivated?
One thing that really helps is to focus on the positive changes you're seeing, whether it's more energy, better focus, weight loss, whatever it is. Remind yourself why you started fasting in the first place.
So keep your eyes on the prize and celebrate those little victories.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of community. Connecting with other people who are fasting can make a big difference. It can give you a sense of belonging and support. Sharing your experiences and challenges with others can make it feel a lot less overwhelming.
It's good to know you're not alone.
Yeah.
Having people who understand could really help.
It really can. And remember to be patient with yourself. Celebrate the small wins. Consistency is what matters. It's not about being perfect. If you mess up or have a day where you don't follow your plan, don't be too hard on yourself. Just get back on track and keep going.
That's such a good reminder. It's about progress, not perfection. I think we've covered just about everything we can on fasting. The science, the methods, the benefits, the risks, even the mental and emotional aspects. So, what are your final thoughts for our listener? They've heard all this information now, and they're ready to start their own fasting journey.
My final thought is this. Fasting can be a really powerful tool, but it's not a magic solution. It's about finding what works for you and making it part of a healthy lifestyle. That includes good food, regular exercise, stress management, and enough sleep.
It's about being thoughtful about it, not just jumping in without thinking.
Exactly. Listen to your body, trust your gut, and if you need help, talk to a healthcare professional.
That's great advice. Thanks for sharing all your expertise with us today.
Always my pleasure.
And to everyone listening, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep taking care of yourselves. We'll see you on our next deep dive.